We got an amazing request from one of our subscribers to look at Salmon Peach by Benjamin Moore. Thank you for commenting and thank you for subscribing. Welcome back to Color Quickie. This episode is all about Salmon Peach. I'm gonna tell you all about this color, some of the technical details, and most importantly, we're gonna go into a color palette that I built based around it that you can use in your home today, tomorrow, or whenever you decide to paint. And this was a really interesting request because it's not one that I've seen requested before. It's not a color that we sold a lot of when I worked at the paint store. And that's because it actually has color. Like, who would have thought? It's not a paint color that's gonna hide in the background and be shy and subdued. It has personality. It's very much a pink-orange hybrid, bit of a light coral, which is not unlike the color of the year by Benjamin Moore called Raspberry Blush, although that one is darker and a little more electrifying. Salmon Peach could almost be interpreted as an entry-level coral because it is a little more pastel leaning, but it actually has more richness and depth than you might expect. You can take a look at its LRV on the Benjamin Moore website, which is the light reflectance value, a 0 to 100% of the amount of light that this color reflects. And as it gets closer to 100, it gets closer to bright white. Salmon Peach is around 63, so that is quite a nice number to be at as an interior wall color because it shouldn't feel too light or too dark in most circumstances. Because when you think of the brightest whites that exist, they usually cap out at like 93, 94, and then your dark colors go all the way down to 3. So 63 is a good spot. It's very middle of the road, and I think in my experience, it's actually the optimal range in terms of lightness. Now, I think because of the coral aspect here, the pink and the orange, the peachiness, we're not being shy. I do see this as more of an accent color, even though it is lighter. The hue itself, the coloration, it is going to be pretty noticeable for better or worse. So if you do enjoy these sort of pink colors, this is a great choice because it does have that orange to energize it ever so slightly. It's not a bubblegum pink or anything like that, although it may veer that way a little bit if you have cooler lighting or you have a north-facing room. So just be aware that this color can be a little volatile and it may look a little more pink in one room and maybe a little more orange in another. So depending on which way you want to go, just test it out and you'll know for sure. So because of that peachiness, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 rooms would have this color. I wouldn't necessarily envelop a whole space in it personally, unless I was living my best Barbie life. I'm just kidding. It's far from Barbie pink, but I do think in the right circumstance, as kind of an accentuating color, it can look really pretty, especially when you pair it with other paint colors to build an awesome color palette, which of course I did for you, for free. Just to press the like button is all I need. Thank you. The first pairing I wanted to go with was a neutral, one of the best-selling colors by Benjamin Moore, just to sort of bring us back to earth a little bit, just to give you a nice template to add Salmon Peach to, and that would be Collingwood. This is a color that I feel has this kind of luxuriousness to it, mainly because it sometimes has this purple undertone that comes out that I think is really chic, but it still is a grayish through and through. Beigey, gray mixed together, but it's a very appealing color that a lot of people love whenever I suggest it to them. And that's also because it has a decent amount to it. Like it's a 61 LRV color. So we're not talking about a light off white here. This is essentially a light mid-tone. And I think it'll really cut through nicely in the same room as Salmon Peach or even in different spaces, just to give you kind of that neutral to sort of play off of that pink. But for the second pairing, I wanted to bring back color a little bit. I felt bad about reverting to neutrals like I sometimes do, so I went with Pilgrim Haze. And some people describe it as a medium gray that leans cool, but I just think it's a tone of blue. It's blue mixed with gray, and it has this kind of this nautical sort of aesthetic to it. It doesn't have any green aspect that can sometimes happen with blues. It almost has a sort of metallic feel to it a little bit, but really it's all about that blue coming through, which I think is beautiful. It's a great color to add some richness to a space, not too dark where it's gonna feel like an off black, but I feel it's fairly robust as a color. Like it's gonna be noticeable. Another accent color that maybe you could use a little more liberally than Salmon Peach. Still, it's not something that I would kind of base a color palette off of. It's definitely more of a secondary, tertiary color for like 1 or 2 spaces. And then wouldn't you know, I introduced another color to this palette. This is a very colorful palette. I like it. It's called Vintage Vogue. Voguing? Is that voguing? Brutal. And essentially, this is one of my favorite types of dark colors. It's like a deep forest hunter green. It feels like you're in nature, in a rainforest. It is just a color that I love, and I even incorporated it in this room. Not Vintage Vogue specifically, but something quite similar. It's a color that I'm really fond of, and I think works beautifully with Salmon Peach. That orange, pink, coral aspect really just bounces off of Vintage Vogue in a beautiful, beautiful way. I can't wait to show you how all these colors look together, but before I do that, we have to talk about trim colors, because you got to paint your baseboards. I know they look nice, but they'll look nicer with a fresh coat of paint on them. And the default choice for a lot of people would be picking a white trim color, an off-white. And in this case, I would go with Simply White. It's simply a great choice. Essentially, it's one of the brightest warm whites that Benjamin Moore makes, and it does rely on a yellow undertone, which I think plays off of the peachiness quite nicely in Salmon Peach. It should feel really nice and clean and crisp. And I think that's important because you have so many other colors being incorporated in this palette. You don't necessarily want to add another element that's distracting you in the form of your baseboards. Just go with something nice and streamlined like Simply White. But if you wanted a darker color alternative, something that was a little more on the darker mid-tone side of things, you can go with Ashley Gray. And this is sort of like Collingwood's darker, deeper cousin, because it does have that slightly purple quality that sometimes shows through, but it works beautifully in this palette. So if you do wanted something that was not off-white on your trim, or you wanted to switch things up on your doors or any woodwork on your walls, maybe some board and batten that's going up, some wainscoting, I think Ashley Gray is a great darker color choice. Are you ready for it? Here's the palette all together. Please let me know what you think of this one. And if you've made it this far, you can support us by subscribing and pressing that like button. It really helps us a lot. And becoming a member by hitting that join button for a nominal fee just to support our full-time YouTube endeavors. More colorful, fantastic content right over here, if I do say so myself.